Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well, surviving this LA heat wave and ready for week 4. This lesson is scheduled for you on the 27th of July. Okay, the 27th of July. I have another new interesting one that, unless maybe if you're from China, you know about her, but we Americans probably don't know enough about her. She was such a powerful lady. So, and if I mispronounce her name incorrectly because I don't speak Mandarin, just be patient with me. You know who I'm talking about, right? So, without further ado, let me go through my usual steps here. Okay, share the screen. Go to the material if it wants to open. There we go. Slideshow from the beginning. Okay, and move onward. Again, HUM, Humanities 106 is the school code, Lives of Extraordinary Women. Okay, really, really powerful ladies. Okay, like I said, down here you can see the week. Again, for you, it's scheduled the 27th of July. So the week after that will be in August. So just to let you know, that's usually the hottest month in Los Angeles if you're new to the area. So be strong, folks. Okay, so Empress Dowager. So on the title, we have Suzy. Sounds like Susie, right? Suzy. So I don't know how do I say Empress Xiao Qing Xia, maybe. So Grand Empress, if you know the word emperor, like the last emperor of China, the female version is the Empress. Okay. And this was a portrait done of her. That's her real face. It's done for a European museum. Okay. Well, let me get into some background on her. Empress Dowager Suzy, born Yehe Nara Xingzhen, was born November the 29th, 1835, and died November the 15th, almost reaching another birthday, in 1908. Okay, so before World War I, but she lived through the 1800s, so quite an interesting time. She was a Chinese noblewoman of the Manchu Yehe Nara clan, concubine, and later regent, who effectively controlled the Chinese government in the late Qing dynasty for almost 50 years. That's quite a long time. Like I said, during that time, it'd be a surprise for people to even live 50 years, let alone be a young woman, let's say in her early 20s, and then being a queen for 50 years. From 1861 until her death in 1908, selected as a concubine of the Xianfeng Emperor in her adolescence, that's teenage years. She gave birth to a son, Zai Chun, in 1856. So that would have made her 21. After Xianfeng Emperor's death in 1861, the young boy became the Tongzi Emperor. She assumed the role of co-empress dowager alongside the emperor's widow, Empress Dowager Xian. Now remember, it quoted here that she was concubine. So you didn't have this thing in the West as a concubine. Obviously, kings had lovers and what have you, and mistresses. So a concubine has more or had more power than just a regular secret girlfriend on the side. She actually swayed power, but she was not the wife. Okay. I as you can see, she became the co-empress, so she was just not a hidden lover, but she would assist the emperor, but emperor's widow. CZ ousted a group of regents appointed by the late emperor. Those are like, it's a hard one to say. Translate, it'd be like, let's say like in like United States, it would be like cabinet members that have certain types of power, but there's many cabinet members. So she ousted or kicked out, these regents that were appointed by the late emperor and assumed the regency along with Xian, who later died. CZ then consolidated or brought together control over the dynasty when she installed her nephew as the Guangxu emperor at the death of her son, the Tongzi emperor. So she had enough power where she was able to put in her own nephew after her own son passed away. And this was in 1875, so after the American Civil War. This was contrary to the traditional rules of succession of the Qing dynasty that had ruled China since 1644. So at that time for 200 plus years. So again, it was not the traditional way that a woman could do this, but you'll find out the skills, political skills and manipulative skills that she had. CZ supervised the Tongzi restoration and made the kingdom coming back into power. A series of moderate reforms that helped the regime survive until 1911. Jeez. 3 years after her death. Although CZ refused to adopt Western models of government, she supported technological and military reforms and the self-strengthening movement. She supported the principles of 100 Days reforms of 1898, but feared that sudden implementation without bureaucratic support would be disruptive and that the Japanese and other foreign powers would take advantage of any weakness, of course, of China. She placed the Guangxu emperor, who she thought had tried to assassinate her, under virtual house arrest for supporting radical reformers and publicly executing the main reformers. So yes, they were killed in a public square in front of the whole town, so everybody would have fear. After the Boxer Rebellion led to invasion by the Allied army, CZ initially backed the Boxer groups and declared war on the invaders, all the Western powers that were coming to carve up China and support the Chinese Boxers. The ensuing defeat was a stunning humiliation. When CZ returned to Beijing from Xi'an, where she had taken the emperor, she became friendly to foreigners in the capital and began to implement fiscal and institutional reforms aimed to turn China into a constitutional monarchy. So her aim was to have a constitution written up and get away from the usual kingdom system that they had. You know, they wanted to do the Western style. The deaths of both Cixi and Guangxu Emperor in November 1908 left the court in the hands of Manchu conservatives, who obviously wanted to continue the kingdom. So the famous one, child Puyi, if you ever saw the movie Last Emperor, that was Puyi, on the throne or became king in a restless, deeply divided society. So the people at that time were not happy with his decision. Historians both in China and abroad have debated her legacy. She is conventionally denounced, which means looked down upon, as a ruthless despot. So, despot is like a dictator who was ruthless. So, anybody that got in her way, she would kill them, or imprison them. So, that's one way she's looked at it. And includes reactionary policies, although successfully self-serving in prolonging the ailing, which means sick or failing Qing dynasty, led to its humiliation and utter downfall in the Wuchang uprising. So initially, her attempt to keep the Qing dynasty system going was successful. But in the long run, since the Qing dynasty was ailing or falling apart, becoming too weak to stay in power, this led to its humiliation when they lost the battle in the Wuchang uprising. Revisionists, which people who look back at history and sometimes change it or change their own mind about how they feel history was, suggested that nationalist and communist revolutionaries scapegoated her for deep-rooted problems beyond salvage. Now, this is a pretty tough passage right here. Let me do my best to translate this for you, okay? If you've never heard the word scapegoat, all right, it is a slang term that means, let's say, for example, you have a problem that you caused, but obviously you don't want people to know it was you. You want people to know that you caused this great trouble. So you're looking for someone you can blame. When you find someone that you can blame, that person becomes your scapegoat. Okay? So what they're saying here is that probably the problems were so deep-rooted or strong that nobody could have saved the Qing dynasty at the time in particular, or China against the foreign invaders. So nationalists led by Chiang Kai-shek and communists led by Mao Zedong, they said, well, we're not tearing apart the country, or we didn't cause the fall there. It was her, right? It's easy to put the blame on her, right? And as it proceeds, it says, and lauded her maintenance of political order. So at the same time, lauded means praised. Like, boy, hey, you did a good job of keeping political order, but you eventually made us lose much of China to the foreigners. So good stuff, but bad girl. It's a mixed review, right? They quote that she was responsible for numerous effective, if belated, which means late, reforms, including the abolition of slavery. So she got rid of slavery. Yes, other countries besides the United States had slavery, probably every country. Ancient torturous punishments. So let's say like here, fortunately now you can do some bad things in the street and you just get a ticket and then usually they'll throw it away. But before, when crime was stronger, it was never like this, where you could actually be tortured for various crimes. And then the ancient examination system in her ailing years, which means in her last years, her dying years. The latter, which means the last, was supplanted by institutions, including the new Peking University, which later became Beijing. So a more Western approach to education. Okay. Her life, considering her birth here. The future Empress Dowager Cixi was born on the 10th day of the 10th lunar month in the 15th year of the rulership of the Dao Guang Emperor, November 29th, 1835. Her father was a Wiseng, member of the Bordered Blue Banner, who held the title of a third-class duke. Palace archives show that Wiseng was working in Beijing during the year of Lady Yehe Nara's birth, an indication that she was born in Beijing. The file records, the file records the location of her childhood home, Pi Chai Hu Tong, Sipai Lao, Beijing. She had a sister named Wan Zhen and a brother named Gui Xiang. Okay, so some nice familiar information there. Okay. Now, legacy. The first portrait we saw of her was from a Westerner. This is Chinese portrait. So continuing, for many years, the mainstream view of Empress Dowager Cixi was that she was a devious despot. Now they're saying devious. Devious is a person who makes all kinds of sneaky plans. Devious is another form of saying sneaky. And she contributed in no small part to China's slide into corruption, chaos, and revolution. So they're saying, she was a big reason that China went into chaos and actually went into a revolution. Cixi used her power to accumulate vast quantities of money, bullion, which we could say it's like gold bullion, for example. I think there's silver bullion too. Antiques, expensive, priceless antiques, and jewelry. Using the revenues of the state as her own, so using the government's money as her own, which you're not supposed to do. The longtime China journalist Jasper Becker recalled that every visitor to the Summer Palace is shown the beautiful lakeside pavilion in the shape of an elegant marble pleasure boat, and told how Cixi spent funds destined for the Imperial Navy, which was China's Imperial Navy, to protect China, on such extravagant fripperies. Oh, that's a word that's disappearing. Frippery. So it's like saying there was money in the government, let's say government bank, that was supposed to be used to make China's navy strong because it was weak compared to the foreign Western powers like England. Say England had maybe the strongest navy at the time. So she took that money instead and said, I'm going to make this beautiful lakeside pavilion and a marble pleasure boat and have all this beauty for me and my guests to enjoy. And they say, which ultimately led to Japan's victory over China in 1895 and the losing of Taiwan. Okay, so again, they're saying, hey, if we could strengthen the Chinese Navy, and maybe could have fought to a draw with Japan because they also had at least a stronger navy than China. But instead, she got her marble boat and summer palace and beautiful garden, and China lost the power of Taiwan in a battle to Japan. Yet, even after the violent anti-foreign Boxer movement and equally violent foreign reprisal, the initial foreign accounts of Cixi emphasized her warmth and friendliness. So again, it's kind of, as we say, a mixed bag, some compliments here and there, but otherwise, is it true she held the largest responsibility for China's loss, or was she scapegoated, right? Like we just discovered that word. Okay. So this is the author of the oil portrait. Catherine Carl oil portrait painted for the exhibit at the St. Louis World's Fair, 1904. And we all know that Cixi died 4 years later. This was perhaps because Cixi took the initiative and invited several women to spend time with her in the Forbidden City. If you haven't been to the Forbidden City, I have been there in Beijing, and it is a city. It is huge. A lot of places I've traveled uh, through the years, they will tell you, they're big buildings or statues or monuments or large areas like this. And you get there and you're not depressed, but a little let down because they're not quite as big as the way they've been described or shown in pictures. So you hear Forbidden City, I was thinking maybe it's like a block, it's one palace and then like a block. No, no, no. This place is huge. It is like a city. Catherine Carl, an American painter, was called to China in 1903 to paint Cixi's portrait for the St. Louis Exposition. In her With the Empress Dowager, Carl portrays Cixi as a kind and considerate woman for her station. So what she's trying to say there, Miss Carl, is that it's a very difficult position to have either as a king or a queen. And you have to make tough choices and tough decisions. And usually that makes people become cold-hearted. But she felt that even though she had this kind of situation, she was kind and considerate for being an empress. Cixi, though shrewd and had great presence, charm, and graceful movements, resulted in an unusually attractive personality. Again, these are quite the compliments. But there have been many politicians throughout the world that had a lot of charisma or charm. They might not have done the best things, but people gave into them because they had such attractive personalities and charm. That's how Adolf Hitler himself won over the German people. They came out of inflation and poverty, and he brought the country and said all these great things about Germany and German people that they eagerly voted for him. Now, what he did later is a different story, but his charisma is what made all those folks actually vote for him at the beginning. Carl also wrote of the Empress Dowager's love of dogs and flowers. You will see later there's a little drawing picture of the kind of dogs that she loved, as well as boating. So again, that's probably why in that lake, which I've also been there by the Summer Palace, there's a marble boat there. So even when she wasn't on a real boat, she wanted to be one that sat on the lake. She also loved Chinese opera and her Chinese water pipes and also European cigarettes, right? So she liked tobacco. Cixi also commissioned the well-known artist Hubert Boss to produce a series of oil portraits. So she also, again, photography still was kind of rare. People didn't take a lot of photos en masse. So you could get one or two. And I don't think people thought that, they thought maybe they would deteriorate over time, but a portrait, we have paintings that are 500 years old. So it's better thinking at the time you have a portrait done. Where now people would say, oh, it's better to take a selfie, right? A picture. Here on the bottom, the publication of China under the Empress Dowager, which was a book by J.O.P. Bland and Edmund Backhouse, contributed to Cixi's reputation with its backdoor gossip, much of which came from palace eunuchs. Oh boy, that's not going to be fun to translate. I'm wondering, should I even try and translate that? Wow. I mean, I know some even American students that let's say I went to school with didn't pay attention in history class and probably never learned uh, what Unix were. But anyway, I'll try to make it as kind as possible. For the queen, maybe the princesses, if there's princesses or daughters, you know, the queen obviously. They had a lot of male assistants, helpers, and with various levels of power. And they could not, the kingdom could not take the chance that the queen or the princesses accidentally became pregnant by one of these male assistants. So they performed, they all had a operation done on themselves so that it would be impossible for them to get the empress slash queen or princesses pregnant. And I'll let you figure out what that was. Okay. Anyway, to get away from that, so it's saying here that these assistants called eunuchs supplied a lot of gossip for this author. So, you know, like saying secret information. Their portrait of her included contradictory elements. So, again, it's the same thing. You know, some probably said great things and some said bad things. Very contradictory lady. Writes one recent study. On the one hand, imperious, manipulative, and lascivious. So, very queen-like, manipulative, making people do things for her benefit. And then lascivious, which means, well, she liked luxury. We'll just say she liked luxury. Otherwise, I don't want to go on the other part of that. And on the other, ingenious, politically shrewd. So again, great political decision maker, even difficult ones, ingenious, like a genius. And conscientious, which means she thought about other people's situations. Backhouse and Bland told their readers that to summarize her essence, right, her as a being, simply, she is a woman and an Oriental. Again, that was a term that was used maybe until the 90s. Now, of course, we use the term Asian, but you can still find maps and things that say the Orient. And, you know, I mean, it's a matter of choice. It's just that now Chinese, Japanese, Korean people would prefer to be called Asian. Backhouse was later found to have forged much of the source material in this work. Now it says that Backhouse was found to have forged, which means his information was not correct. He was making up lies or stories. The vivid writing and lascivious details of their account provided material for many books over the following decades, including Chinese fiction and histories that drew on a 1914 translation. So again, that's a age-old standard there. And it's even it's done till this day. Remember Trump coined the term fake news, right? So you're lying and spreading rumors. So this has been a technique throughout history, you know. So I mean, let's just say in the writer's defense, it's not great, but if he wrote material, and let's say it was 100% true, but just boring stuff and nothing wild, he might not sell too many books. So instead, he makes up a lot of lies that sound great and fantastic and dangerous and evil, you name it. And boy, he sells a lot of books. That's going to tell you that's what I want to do. So, you know, I had a discussion with I don't know if he's a friend, but someone I know through Facebook recently, and he was trying to say certain things. And I said, you're trying to put what you're saying out there as truth, but you weren't even born when these things happen and you were not there. So why are you going to say these, outlandish things? Some people are still alive from that time and are going to come and, could go against you. And he said, well, this kind of stuff sells books. That's what I want to do. So it didn't sound like he was interested in the truth, right? So, okay. In the middle, in the People's Republic after 1949, the image of the Manchu Empress was debated and changed several times. She was sometimes praised for her anti-imperialistic role. So she was praised for fighting against the foreigners in the Boxer Uprising. Chinese fought against foreign powers. And sometimes she was reviled or hated as a member of the feudalist regime. So if you remember the communists who came in, they wanted a whole new form of government and they pushed this modern style government. So anybody involved in the old Chinese ways of king and queen and these kinds of things, they were feudalism, and we hated that. That kept people down, they felt. Mao Zedong's wife, Jiang Qing, was arrested in 1976 for abuse of power. An exhibit at the Palace Museum put CZ's luxurious goods on display to show that a female ruler weakened the nation. So that's very interesting. So we all know who Mao Zedong was, person that led the Chinese Revolution and made China communist in the 1940s. So later, his wife was arrested in 1976 for abuse of power. And then to the communists to show that, hey, we're correct because now they're attacking CZ and saying, see, we had a female queen and she destroyed the nation. So, it's the same thing that Jiang Qing is trying to do. So women must not have ultimate power. And it's funny, you hear these young people now that have never lived in a communist country, but are saying communism is the way to go and it's more freedom for women. Well, it's not freedom for women when they jail Mao Zedong's wife and then say we should never have women in power. So I don't know what fantasy they're looking at. They should look at the true history here. At the bottom, by the mid-1970s, views among scholars began to change again. Su Fan Cheng's doctoral dissertation at the University of California at Berkeley was the first study in English to use court documents rather than popular histories and hearsay or gossip, like was stated before. Despite this, writers such as Zheng Chan have criticized this narrative and have written books such as Chan's Empress Dowager Cixi, the concubine who launched modern China in order to offer an opposing view. So again, the dichotomy here. The lady from Berkeley, it's like, yeah, she was bad. And then this other author has said she was great. She was a concubine. And she moved China into the modern era. It was her effort. So always these crisscrossing views. Several widely read popular biographies appeared. Sterling Seagrave's Dragon Lady, The Life and Legend of the Last Empress of China, portrays Cixi as a woman stuck between the xenophobic faction of Manchu nobility and more moderate influences. So I'm going to have to translate that as well. Okay. So xenophobic, so he's trying to say the Manchu dynasty wanted to stay Manchu only. You know, the majority of people in China are Han, right? So there was not to be any Han rulers according to them. So anytime you're xenophobic in any country or any area, you're for your one group only. So it says here that she was, again, in a situation, like we said earlier, where she was possibly scapegoated. She was in a situation she couldn't win. She was stuck between the xenophobic Manchu kingdom and she tried to do more moderate influences. So back and forth, back and forth. Tough position to be in. In 2013, Chen Chang's biography, Empress Dowager Cixi, the concubine who launched modern China, portrays Cixi as the most capable ruler and administrator that China could have had at that time. See, again, she's being praised here. This author reveals nobody could have done better than her at that time. She was the perfect person for that turbulent time. Pamela Kyle Crossley said in the London Review of Books that Chang's claims seem to be minted from her own musings and have little to do with what we know was actually going in China. So again, here's a new author, Pamela Kyle Crossley, who's attacking Jun Chang's biography and saying, no, these are Chang's fantasies. And she's not dealing with the reality because we knew exactly what was going on in China. So obviously this is going to be a report against Cixi. Although Crossley was sympathetic to restoring women's place in Chinese history, she found rewriting Cixi as Catherine the Great, which we read about already, or Margaret Thatcher is a poor bargain or poor result. The gain of an illusory icon at the expense of historical sense. Now, this is interesting because this very much matches, again, what we call, or they call themselves, the left in the United States at the present time. She's warning and saying, look, she's saying Cixi, did these bad things, right? Or she wasn't capable on certain levels. But authors like Jun Chang want to say, oh, she was an icon and she was fantastic. So she's saying it's really bad if you try to make someone that was not good and was bad, you try to make them a hero. And like I was saying, now on the left, they want to make certain people heroes that maybe are not deserving of being made heroes. Maybe they have a bad police record or stealing money or who knows what, but instead it's like, no, we want to have them look good, so let's make them some type of hero. But again, this author is saying that's really terrible because you're not, what's more important is having the actual historical answer and what really went down. So obviously these kinds of things have been dealt with in the past too. So interesting stuff. Okay, so this is from the book here. This is her as a younger lady. And you will learn that she loved these peacocks, the traditional animals of the kingdom were dragons, but she didn't want anything to do with that. And she loved her little Chinese Pekingese dogs, right? And this is how she portrayed herself. They'll talk about this too. Coloring of the lip. So let us proceed. Okay, behind the curtain, Su Zi, born 1835, died in 1908 in Beijing, China. Empress of China, ruler of 1/3 of the world's population during 47 years of great change. Again, a lengthy, lengthy time to be a queen or a king. So starting from the top, Chinese society was structured to keep women as virtual slaves. That's how they felt their position should be. Yet a few women, that is, throughout history, achieved power. And Su Ci was the most memorable. Clever, beautiful girls could become companions to royal men. And 14-year-old Su Ci went willingly when her family nominated her as one. Please go with these men of the court, men of nobility. Life inside the Forbidden City, a vast complex of palaces surrounded by pink walls, 35 feet high. It's like I told you, you should go there one day. Was a haven from parts of China where women were still being crippled by having their feet bound. That's where they wear these way too tight shoes and it deformed their feet there. If you've seen the picture of women that had their feet since they were teenagers until they were senior citizens, and they take off those shoes, their feet look like pig's feet. You know, again, if girls, if you wear a size 7, someone's making you wear a size 3. Imagine what that's going to do to your feet over many years. Su Zi was not taught to read or write. Again, this would help to keep women uneducated and in a form of slavery, but to arrange flowers, play music, be obedient and perfectly groomed. A red dot was painted on her lower lip. Remember, I pointed that out on the picture. And to prepare for childbearing or giving birth, having children, to get them ready to have royal babies. Companions were not supposed to meddle in political affairs, but Emperor Xing Feng did trust Su Zi's judgment and was said to consult her. So when there were political affairs, you were one of these women connected to a royal person, you were supposed to shut up. You were not supposed to offer your opinion on the political affairs of China. But the Emperor Xing Feng somehow, remember, she was shrewd, trusted her judgment, and is said to have actually asked for her opinion. Like shocking. I'm sure most women were dealt with. Why would we ask you? You're a woman, right? That's what's the thinking at the time. At age 21, she became the only one of his wives, I don't remember how many wives he had, and companions to give birth to a son, and thus gained enormous power literally overnight. And I've been told too from my Korean students, this also happened in Korea. I learned the term shibaji, where the royal person is married to a woman and she keeps on giving him girls. He can actually have another, like stated here, concubine. And the woman's not his wife, but she's trying to give him a son. And if she does give him the son, watch out, because now she will inherit his riches, not the actual wife. So I don't know if this originally came from China and spread to Korea, but this was very common in Asian countries at the time. So by having this son, she gained enormous power literally overnight. When the emperor died, Su Zi seized control or took control as the mother of the new 5-year-old emperor. At meetings that began at 4 o'clock in the morning, her son sat in her lap while she handed down decisions from behind a gauze or cotton curtain to give the illusion of invisibility required for women. Isn't that fascinating? Or cultural thinking. So it's like, okay, you had the son of the emperor, he died. Obviously, the son's 5 years old and can't really govern. So you can make your decisions and we will follow, the kingdom will follow. But still, a woman is supposed to be invisible in our culture. So it's not like they wouldn't allow her to have like a press conference like we do now. President Biden gets up and addresses the country, gets on the TV. She had to talk, but behind a curtain. Okay, fascinating. Servants carried the empress to meetings in a shrouded chair. So the chair also was covered, so nobody could see her, but they knew she was being carried in the shrouded chair. After hours of preparing her appearance, she had a vault. So if you don't know what a vault is, like every bank has a vault. It's that big round steel door with a lock. They keep money and people have safe deposit boxes with jewelry and important documents. So a vault held 3,000 ebony boxes of everyday jewels, not her best jewels, okay, everyday jewels. And most received as gifts. So I guess she bought herself the high priced diamonds and everyday jewels were just gifts. Worshippers. And to display as many as possible, Susie changed clothes and accessories many times a day. So not once a day. Like you always hear these women, actress, some famous woman, and it's like, hey, Monday she wore this pink dress. And Tuesday she wore a yellow dress. And Wednesday she wore a black pantsuit. And on and on. Every day a different color, a suit or a dress. Susie changed clothes many times a day. Forget that once a day business. So this lady had to be on top of her fashion. She preferred phoenixes, like I showed you the phoenix bird, rather than the traditional imperial dragons. I'm sure that upset some people, but she had the power to do what she wanted. Embroidered or sewed on her silk gowns. She wore fresh flowers in her elaborately braided hair, musk perfume, and jewelry protectors over her 3-inch fingernails. Wow, she could do some good scratching like a cat. Boy, be careful. Susie's survival required virtue. She would have been immediately executed otherwise. So they were still saying, hey, you make certain mistakes, we're going to try and kill you. Boldness. She broke traditions constantly. Again, the minor ones here, giving the information, changing the imperial dragon to phoenix, right? And expert manipulation of those around her. So she was able to manipulate many people in the Forbidden City, and they did what she wanted them to do. She had that kind of skill. She reacted aggressively when threatened, once saying dryly, as has always been the case in emergencies, I was equal to the occasion. So not your traditional style woman that maybe, or most of the time, men reacted aggressively with her and threatened her. They would shy away or say, I'm sorry, or, I won't do that again. She was like, hey, I'm equal to the occasion. I'm ready for your violence. But that also helps when you have the ultimate power. She brought in scholars to tutor her and became well educated. See, she said, hey, they wouldn't teach me this growing up. I want to read and write. I want to learn, whatever. No man was allowed to sit in her presence. This was a problem when cars came into use, as no chauffeur could sit down near her. So that means they probably had women chauffeurs. Again, strictly following cultural guidelines. As a woman, she was not permitted to meet a foreigner, but she finally did at age 63, nor to travel outside the Forbidden City, which she did at 70. So, can you imagine more or less your whole life? Even though it's a huge place, I mean, it's not like an LA, but it's like a giant complex, like a Disneyland size, you know? Um, you don't leave. Just year after year, you don't leave. I mean, even with the foods they give you and they treat you like a queen because you are, it's like, did you ever get bored and want to go different places? A visitor said he had never seen more tremendous willpower, that's Susie had, in a human being, nor as much kindness and love. So again, here's a visitor with numerous compliments for her. Susie seemed anxious to be liked, patting women on the cheek and handing over expensive jade statues that anyone admired. So imagine if you were able to see her at the time and you see this beautiful, expensive jade statue. I really like it. It's so pretty. It's yours. You can have it. Wow. But she laughed only when she played with her Pekingese dogs. So she loved her Pekingese dogs. Each wore a bright ribbon secured with a pearl clip, and they had their own palace with marble floors. So the dogs had their own palace. So, and you can buy Pekingese dogs to this day. So buy yourself one, especially if you're a lady, and then say, I'm Susie. I have a Pekingese dogs. She hated cats. So typical, like today in America, people will ask you, hey, are you a cat person or a dog person? There are people that like both, but a big majority of the people who love cats don't like dogs. And if they love dogs, they usually hate cats. So this was also going on in China. Huh? She hated cats. And none of her 3,000 servants was allowed to keep one. So 3,000 servants taking care of her. I suppose if she found that she had a cat, you'd probably go to jail. Hopefully it wouldn't be tortured, but you imagine that? Her favorite number was 6. She ordered all furniture to be made in 6s. So don't bring me 1, don't bring me 10, bring me 6. I don't know why she loved 6. Interesting. She was skilled at painting. Those are drawings of her Pekingese dogs. I'm sure you've seen these to this day. Cute little things, a lot of hair. And when worried, would call for her brushes and ink. Her red lacquered chest held huge collections of mechanical toys. It's very odd that someone who was not taught at an early age how to read and write, that they were good at art, right? That's very interesting. I, on the other hand, was taught to read and write at an early age, but I suck at art. I don't know. I must be lacking a gene. And then mechanical toys, probably because as a young girl, she was groomed to marry early to a noble person and was not given the usual childhood of playing with toys. So a lot of people like that. Michael Jackson, for case in point, made a kind of circus like Neverland at his home and played with young boys and said I wasn't allowed to have toys and play a lot when I was a kid. I had to practice playing the guitar, singing, and dancing. So, yeah, very common. After a breakfast of warm lotus root porridge, Susie would walk on intricate paths among blossoming peach, plum, and cherry trees, crossing bridges over ponds full of golden carp. Those are those large, colorful, expensive Japanese fish that you see in the ponds all the time. Snacks were pine nuts and honeysuckle tea. For dinner, at the sound of a gong, she would enter a chamber and choose from 150 150 dishes. Can you imagine that? Some people complain they go to restaurants now and they have a pretty good menu, but they're like, I can't find anything I want. Imagine them offering you 150 different dishes every day. And these dishes ranged from eggs poached in chicken broth, her favorite, pork with cherries, that sounds pretty good, to bear's paw, yes, a bear's paw or hand, stuffed with mushrooms, and the laboriously, which means it took a lot of work, prepared Peking duck. So quite an extensive menu. I don't think I would eat a bear's paw even if they offered it to me. Despite her attempts to retire, national turmoil kept the empress in power until age 73, when she appointed Pu Yi, her nephew's nephew, as her successor. She soon had a stroke and died 2 days later. Her feelings about her role as empress were mixed. Even her own feelings were mixed. Very interesting. Her final words were, never again allow a woman to hold the supreme power in the state. I don't think that would be, again, a popular thing for, let's say, Hillary Clinton to hear her whole life. She was groomed to become the president. Unfortunately, it didn't happen for her. She ran twice. Her dream is that she would be the best president ever because she's a woman. And then here's a woman who was a queen and said, don't let a woman get this position again. Very interesting. I would love to hear more about this. Yeah. So ever after, Suzy had struggled to keep her Manchu dynasty from unraveling. And after she died, it lasted just 3 more years. So the Manchu stayed in power for only 3 more years after she died. The last emperor, Puyi, was forced to step down. That was actually the Japanese were in control at that time. And he spent the rest of his life as an ordinary citizen of communist China after the re-education camp. Few rulers have received such bad press as Suzy has. So it's a few people have received such bad press, meaning no one's really been as, or very few have been as badly criticized as her. It took New York Times 6 weeks to assemble its obituary, which means they put it in the paper that someone died. Why 6 weeks? I don't know. Which referred to her by another woman's name and used a photo of yet another woman. So they did not do their research. And this was the New York Times. Very bad. I can see someone like me making a mistake, but not the New York Times. All the money, they have to do things correctly and do correct research. Wrong photos and wrong names. Chinese and Western historians have portrayed her as an evil tyrant with a disgusting lifestyle. Only in recent years has a truer picture emerged. So you see there, they're saying this is not 100% true. This is to sell books. But even today, the People's Republic of China uses her as a symbol of hated imperialism. In movies, Suzy is portrayed as a ruler who beheads people, that means cuts their heads off, saws them into pieces, and hurls them down wells. I don't know if that is true or not. This was not mentioned in the reading. Okay, the reading is done, and now we're on to the questions. 1, how was ancient Chinese society structured towards women? Was it, hey, we love women and we want women to be queens? Is that how it was? 2, Suzy was not taught to read or write, but instead what? So what was she taught? List the things. There's a couple of things there, so don't just put one, all right? Again, practice for the midterm, which will be next week. And I should be able to see you in person. That'll be fantastic. 3, what was inside Suzy's vault? Was it money, gold, or McDonald's Big Macs? What was inside her vault? Or which three things did Susie's survival require? So again, please list three, not one or two. So her survival required that she have these abilities or do these things in a certain way for her not to be imprisoned or killed. How did she try to become better? So if you find this, you'll easily find the answer. I use the exact terminology. 6, how old was she when she finally traveled outside the Forbidden City? Was she 21? Was she 19? Was she 40? How old was she? 7, when did she like to laugh? She liked to laugh at a certain time around certain people. And what did she hate, if we can call them people? 8, I'm sure she did. What did Susie like to eat for breakfast? Was it McGriddle? Was it an omelet? Was it Raisin Bran, sugar frosted flakes? What was it? Number 9. I'm only going to give you 9. I'll cut one off this week because we have the midterm next week. What were her final words before she died? Were they, I want to live longer, I want more power, or I need a donut? What were her final words? Okay. All right, so let's hit the stop share. Okay, we are at the end of the lesson. Again, this one's for you on July the 27th, the 4th week. Be prepared for the midterm following week, and I should be able to see you in person. You'll come in, I'll give you the midterm, and you'll take it and then go home for the day. Okay? So thank you much and good luck to everyone. Bye-bye.